Hello, Rick. Welcome those joining. I didn't do any advertisements for Dhammapalooza today, so we'll see. We'll see what kind of numbers we get. Hello, Gregory. Hello, Jay. Welcome. Hello, Douse. Hello, Joy. Welcome. Hello, Anna. All right, we'll get started in about maybe 2 minutes. Hello, Yankee. Hello, John and Audrey. Oh, hello, Gretchen. All right, we'll get started in about a minute. Let's share screen. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Atta mahapurissa vitakka Apicchasayang Dhammo Nyayang Dhammo Mahicchasa Santuttasayang Dhammo Nyayang Dhammo Asantuttassa Pavivittasayang Dhammo Nyayang Dhammo Sanganikaramassa Araddaviryasayang Dhammo Nyayang Dhammo Kusitassa Upatittasattisayang Dhammo Nyayang Dhammo Muttasattissa Samahittasayang Dhammo Nyayang Dhammo Asamahittassa Panyavato Ayang Dhammo Nyayang Dhammo Dupanyassa Nippapanchara Masayang Dhammo Nippapancharitino Nyayang Dhammo Papanchara Massa Papancharitino. English. 8 great noble thoughts. This Dhamma is for reducing desire, not for increasing desire. This Dhamma is for increasing contentment, not for increasing discontentment. This Dhamma is for cultivating seclusion, not for becoming sociable. This Dhamma is for becoming energetic, not for becoming lazy. This Dhamma is for developing mindfulness, not developing unmindfulness. This Dhamma is for developing composure, not for making restlessness. This Dhamma is for increasing wisdom, not for decreasing wisdom. This Dhamma is for delighting in freedom from impediments, not for delighting in impediments. All right. Okay, friends. Well, it is Monday night, 7 p.m. GMT -5. And that means it is time for another Dhammapalooza, Monday night festival of Dhamma with the Maggasekha community, where we do a variety of Dhamma-related activities. We just did some chanting. Later, we'll do some meditation. In between, who knows? Because Dhammapalooza is, as always, a community-guided event. What that means is, for the next couple minutes in the chat, if you have a question you'd like me to answer, you can type the question in the chat. If you have a topic you'd like me to give a Dhamma talk on, you can type that in the chat. If you have a topic you'd like the community here in the chat to discuss, the community and I can discuss. This is a very good thing, especially last week was really good with everybody supporting each other in the chat. I really like to see that because this is a community that we're trying to foster here. So it's always good when I see people helping out each other, giving each other support and things like that in the chat. So we'll give it a few minutes. If you have questions, if you have topics, type it in there. And if nothing, then we'll do some sutta roulette. Hello, Karuna. The cuddler of cats. Right. All right, here. Rick has a question. What are ways for a layperson to determine skillful priorities in their life and practice? Thank you. Well, right, the Buddha tells lay people what's important. Taking care of, parents and family and things like that. Family, children. You have duties to a spouse, duties to children, duties to parents, etc. So that should be, one of your priorities as a layperson in life. If you don't have such priorities, well, then you're a bit more kind of free to choose what your priorities are, and that could be what I think what calls to you best, or what fits you best in the time in life that you're in right now. I mean, obviously, there's if you look at the Mangala Sutta, right? Mahamangala Sutta is a list of blessings. And these list of blessings are not just magical things that arise, they're things that you work towards. So you go to the Mangala Sutta and check out all the blessings there. See what ones you don't have. Maybe that can be a priority to work towards those. Right? So this is something that, because each person is going to be different in this in terms of skillful priorities. But if you do have the practice as a high priority in your life, then you'll find time to do it. You'll find ways of implementing the practice and developing the practice in your daily life. So I think that's probably a good thing. Mahamangala Sutta. You can find it in the Maggasekha chanting book. That's a very good guide. One who has fulfilled all of these is everywhere invincible. Theirs is the blessing supreme. Lots of skillful, good priorities there. Hello, Bill. Welcome. Douse has a question. Chicken or egg? What makes something desirable? Does uh, does the desire make it desirable, or because we deem it desirable, it gives rise to desire? Answer, I suppose, is pretty much karma, but it's an interesting question. Well, desire comes from us. It's the second noble truth. Desire is relative. All right, now, obviously, as a human being, we share a lot of desires. The desire to eat, to sleep, to defecate, to procreate, like these basic animalistic desires. But after that, we all have lots of different desires. But it all comes from within. You've spent this life and many lifetimes before feeding those desires, making them stronger. And so, just because you go to a new life doesn't mean you escape your karma. So you still have to deal with those desires in this life. Something desirable is usually a pleasant experience that we want to keep experiencing. And we go all out of our way and do lots of skillful and very unskillful things in attempting to keep experiencing that pleasant desire, that pleasant feeling with our desires. Jay has a good question. I always like when people ask questions about monastics, because I know people have interesting questions they want to ask, but they maybe get embarrassed or things like that. When we used to do retreats at Bhavana, because the questions were always anonymous, people would always ask all kinds of interesting questions. People, I guess, are self-conscious about asking questions they might think are silly. But does every monastic eventually have to give public speaking? Um, yes and no. Every monastic should be able to give at least a small talk at like a, and talking about the Buddhist world, at like a house dana or a blessing, a house blessing or something like that, especially as you become more senior. You should be able, to at least give a small talk. Not every monastic is required nor able to be more of a in a teaching role. Someone who a large part of their practice is sharing the Dhamma. That's not required, and also that's a very good thing. Because there's people who should just not be teachers. This goes for secular teachers and Dhamma teachers as well, right? And so, um, that being said, there's a huge drought of Dhamma teachers in the West. There's way more demand than there is supply, which is why you have things like, lay teacher schools and things like this that are meeting that demand. But no, it's not required. Some monks are just not inclined towards it. They don't have the skills, the public speaking skills, the interpersonal skills. Um, they are inclined more towards just being by themselves in the woods, you know. Um, so I would say it's really up to the monastic. Now, some places will kind of throw you to the wall. Look what happened at Bhavana. I mean, I was a Samanera. I was in robes less than a month before I was teaching at a Bhavana retreat. That's extremely rare. That there might be two or three other monks on the planet that did something like that, because it's usually not seen as a wise thing to do. So most monastics won't throw their junior monastics into teaching that early. And in like Thai forest, usually you won't give even a small Dhamma talk until you've been a monk like how I am now, like 7 or 8 months, years as a monk. Then maybe you might be give a small couple-minute Dhamma talk. So there's a diverse number of perspectives on this. But if a monastic doesn't feel comfortable doing so, they're not required, nor should they be forced to do so. One of the things that, as lay people, when engaging with monastics, there are some monks who are good at yapping. I'm one of them. I mean, I did public speaking even before I was a monk. Public speaking and talking to people is just something that I enjoy doing. And so, hopefully you learn Dhamma from not only my words, but also my deeds. But there are other monks who you will never learn Dhamma from their words. Even maybe their words might not be all that great, but you observe how they live and how they act, and they're teaching you Dhamma. A great example of this is Bhante Dhammaratana at Bhavana Society, one of my favorite monks in the holy life. He's an older guy. He's little, very happy and very kind of welcoming, but also a little prashnikany, and sometimes has mood. I think he's probably been in dementia for a little while now. I mean, I haven't spoken to him in years, so I don't know how it's progressed. But I mean, what I'm trying to say is he's not good at giving Dhamma talks. He never has been. He doesn't give Dhamma talks at Bhavana. He might give 1 or 2 Dhamma talks a year in general. But my years of visiting Bhavana for 3 years before I moved there, and then my years as a lay person, as a monk living at Bhavana, I learned so much good Dhamma from Bhante Dhammaratana. He could get angry, and then 2 seconds later, he would be smiling and he'd be happy and be very kind. And you could see that he would be able to let things go let things go so quickly. One of the things that I learned from him, especially as somebody who was becoming a host, like at Bhavana, when you're a retreat center, you're basically also like a host in addition to all the other things you're doing. Um, the first time I went there, he's like, "Oh, hey, what's your name?" And I said, "I'm Joe. He's like, "Where you from?" "I'm from Toms River, New Jersey." And then maybe like 3 months later, I went back, and he's like, "Oh, hey, you're Joe from Toms River, aren't you?" And I felt like so welcome and so like he remembered me. It was such a nice feeling. And when I moved to Bhavana and I became like the coordinator of the retreats and all this kind of stuff, I tried to use that example of trying to remember. I mean, I met easily over 1,000 people in my 5 years at Bhavana, 5.5 years. It's probably even way more than that. So I can't remember everybody's name, and I'm not good at it. But that example to me was such an example that I wanted to follow. I still, to this day, I try to use all kinds of mental tricks to remember people's names, things like that. But this is a person who is not a speaker on the Dhamma, but in general, they act the Dhamma. They live the Dhamma in a good way. So this is an important thing to understand with monks. Some monks are good speakers. Other monks only show their Dhamma through their actions. Ideally, you want somebody who's a good speaker and shows the Dhamma through the actions. Both. But yeah, it is what it is. If a monk has made seemingly irrational public comments like criticizing vaccines or gender equality, should one still trust their teachings if it appears otherwise grounded in scholarly Dhamma? Well, that's a good lesson for you. You should be doing this all the time, but well, why do I think I'm right? Maybe this monk is right. Do you really think you're right? Do you know you're right? I don't know. It's a good lesson, right? This is something that I developed doing even before I was a Buddhist. Okay, this person has this different perspective. Why? Let me try to investigate why. And sometimes it's because they're stupid or ignorant. Sometimes they understand something that you don't. You learn more. You grow from hearing different perspectives. This is something that is part of your practice. It helps us to not get so attached to our views. Right? The Buddha, how often in the suttas does the Buddha talk about this tangled skein of views? How our views cause us suffering, cause us harm to others. You might say, oh, well, they don't, they're a monk. They can't hear all the perspectives. They don't know. It's possible. Let me put it this way. I probably know more about what's happening out there than the average person does. And that's because as a monk, I've had more free time to learn about these things, even though I shouldn't. But years back, when people started coming with concerns about what's going on in the world, I started paying attention, even though I stopped paying attention because, like, I want to be a monk. I don't want to pay attention to the world. I'm trying to leave it. Goodbye. Out of compassion, I started paying attention all those years ago. And even though I've tried to stop paying attention fully, I can't because I have concerns about the world and I see a lot of issues going on, and because there's that part of me that was involved in engaging in these things that I thought I put to bed. But when I let it come out, it came out again. And so now I will spend, oh, what's going on with this? And what is this president saying? And what is that? And I try to minimize. It's not like I do it all day, but that was part of my MO as a layperson. Really trying to investigate and understand what's going on from a variety of different perspectives. And that has allowed me to see situations in ways that most people can't, because they're stuck to one perspective and they don't want to question their perspective or give another perspective any space in their mind. There's a quote. There's something like the sign of a wise mind is one where they can hold contradicting views in their mind to investigate. Right? That's not something that just comes to people. That is something you have to work with. You have to develop. Instead of automatically jumping to my side versus their side, or they're wrong, let me question. Let me investigate. What does the Buddha say? When you have heard such a thing, do not immediately accept it or reject it, but go to the suttas. Right? So when you've heard such a thing, this is good advice. When you've heard such a thing, don't immediately accept it or reject it. You see what's going on with this Israel Palestine thing, with the hospital, right? First this person bombed it, then that person bombed it, then this person bombed it, and back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. How can you know? You can't know. It's just crazy. you can't know or try, because you only have certain avenues to know things. But you should always question, always investigate. Somebody has a different perspective. Okay, why? Let me understand that perspective. It still could be wrong, but at least after I've investigated and I've questioned my own perspectives, I say, no, I think they're probably off. But I understand the logic as to why they understand this. Right? So that's what I would say. Yes. Jay says, it's the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. Yes, that's very good. That's so true. That's so true. Jesus, I've had some really dark perspectives and thoughts in my mind. Really. Like how to understand a person who's a concentration camp survivor, or the person who molested little kids that I'm sitting in front of as part of my job. Yeah. I've entertained some of the darkest stuff in humanity in my mind, and how I might actually be able to do that. Not an easy thing to do, but I'm under no delusions that I would be the one who did all the good things when in bad times. Now that I'm a monk, maybe I'd have a better chance of doing the good things. But if I was just a random person in a random situation, chances are I would be able to do that as well. It's rough, it's brutal, but that's a very good thing. So this is the other thing. For one, honestly, this is why I don't talk about other things other than Dhamma. Because whatever I say, somebody will disagree with it. And some people will agree with it. And what will that have done? That really it will not have done anything. What will it have done? Will it have been any benefit to my live stream and the people coming to it? Probably not. What is the Buddha talk about? Winning and losing. The victor relishes and the defeated is sorrowful. And then the next day, the roles are reversed. Right? It's not, in my opinion, it's not worth a monastic talking about these things. At least hey, at least a monastic who is very well, they speak only from the suttas, like Bhavana Society. Bhante G said to me in the beginning, he says, Jayasara, he says, people don't want to hear you, they want to hear the Buddha. He didn't say that in like a New York accent like I just did, but he says, Jayasara, people do not want to hear you, they want to hear the Buddha. And so even though, yes, I do include sometimes my own perspectives or my own struggles on the journey, it's always to support what the Buddha, to kind of give a modern personal example of what the Buddha is saying in the suttas. And so with that regard, I don't think you really need to know my stance on this or my stance on it. That's what's happening in the world today. Are you with them? Are you with us? Whatever the position is, there's no nuance. Nuance is dead. You might be like, well, I kind of agree. That's not good, but that's also not. Oh, you're one of them. This is the nature of the world. This is what's happening. And so, in my opinion, it's better that monastics don't get involved in these things and share the Dhamma. This is the most important thing. So, frankly, if this monk, like, they spend half the time talking about this and that, and then half the time the Dhamma, I wouldn't listen to them. I couldn't. Me personally, like, I would be like, this half the time the Dhamma is pretty good, but I'm not going to bother with this. This is killing me. That's me personally. I'm saying. But if their Dhamma is good, if they're teaching from the suttas, then that's okay. That's good. So it's really, you don't have to be so attached to any one teacher anyway. This is what I've always said, right? I've never encouraged even people who say, Bhante J, you're my teacher. I'm like, well, no, not really. Because I'm not into the whole kind of attaching to one teacher, guru kind of a thing. And that's not even necessarily, even after I'm 10 Vasa and I ordain people, I'm still not going to be that. It's just how I am. Even if I'm 70 Vasa, I'm not going to be that way, I don't think. Although it is how people are. So one day I might just give up and not try to fight it. But when you listen to this person, if you're getting benefit from them, just like everything, I've met lots of monks, and a lot of those monks I never want to see ever again in my life. And when I think about them, I try not to get too wrapped up in the negative aspects of those monks. I try to reflect on what I learned from them, even if it's what's not to do. Thankfully, this monk taught me what I will never do when I become a senior monastic. It was a very good lesson from this monk that taught me good monastic Dhamma. If you can compartmentalize, I don't care about this part, but this part is good and beneficial, then maybe you can, listen to that monastic. All right. You met Karuna and Bhante Rahula. Is this Bhante Rahula at Line of Wisdom, Tokyo? Or is this, I don't know. Welcome, Tokyo. Ah, yes. All right, yeah. I know Bhante Rahula fairly well. He was the abbot for 23 years of the monastery where I ordained, Bhavana Society, although he had left before I came. And also I've spent a couple months with him. I spend a couple months with him each year. Probably going to spend some time with him in January and February at Line of Wisdom. So maybe you'll meet me in person if you're visiting there, if you live close. All right, very good. Okay, back to questions. Oh boy, we don't have all night, Bill. I'm sorry. What a question. Why is there an issue in Theravada monasteries to ordaining women? Women were monks in the suttas. Yes, this is true. Again, I mean, this is a multi-hour long conversation. This is just a huge conversation. Um, to try to make it short, oh, Aya would make it even twice as long as I would. But yeah, so to try to make it short, you kind of have to understand Asian perspective. And Asian perspective is very ancient perspective. This is a human perspective, but in the modern West, we've kind of lost it. But what's very common in Asian countries is that the the ancestors are to be respected. And see, so what you have in multiple avenues of Buddhism related to the monastic rules, both for bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, what you have is a tradition and a people who have, reached a certain point where they say, things that happened in the past and things were not done in the past for one reason or another. And so the people today will say, monastics, lay people will say, who am I to change something or to do something different when these people in the past who were arhants, maybe, who were awakened beings, they didn't change this. They didn't do anything about it. And I'm going to do something about it? No. Right? So there's such a deep reverence and respect for the elders, which is a good thing. Honestly, I think the West needs more of it, to be honest with you. I really do think that the West needs more of respect for your elders. How we treat old people in the West is horrible. But this can also cause a lot of friction. So, long story short, what happens is this. 1,000 years ago, in Theravada, the Bhikkhuni lineage dies. There's no more Bhikkhunis anymore. They're gone. Throughout history, the Buddhist monastic lineage has almost died multiple times in Theravada. In Sri Lanka, in Thailand. Thankfully, there's always been, even through wars and famines and, droves of monks dying off and, all these kind of things happening, the the bhikkhu line has always survived. And that's because it made it to different countries. The bhikkhuni line, like for instance, in Theravada, the country that's the most anti-ordaining bhikkhunis is Thailand. And a large chunk of that is because really by the time Buddhism got really set in Thailand, there were no more Bhikkunis. So there's no history in Thailand of Bhikkunis. It's always been bhikkhus. Sri Lanka is a different story. Sri Lanka has literally, stories of how the son and daughter of King Asoka, who were bhikkhu and bhikkhuni, came to Sri Lanka. They brought the Bodhi tree to Sri Lanka and things like that. So in Sri Lanka, there's a bit more of a history in there. So it was a little bit easier for them, not easy, but it was a little bit easier for them to accept the desire to bring the Bhikkhuni order back to life. And so when it came down to the modern era and people wanted to bring the Bhikkhuni order back to life, the answer is, well, how? Because there's, monastic law that needs to be followed. Right? You can't just magically, poof, okay, everything's back to life. You have to do it, as laws, monastic law that was set down. And for the longest time, the general consensus was that bhikkhunis had to be ordained on both sides, bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. And so if there's no more bhikkhunis left, there's just bhikkhus, then there logically cannot be any more bhikkhuni ordinations. And so it was just left at that. And there was in ancient times there was definitely some back and forth between the Buddhist countries, but not as easily as today, and they were still much more kind of confined to their own countries. So, doing something like what brought the Bhikkhuni order back in Theravada in the 90s couldn't happen in the ancient times. What happened in the 90s? Well, studies found that the Dharmaguptaka Bhikshuni lineage in the Mahayana is the offshoot of the same lineage from Theravada Bhikkhunis. Now, this is still heavily debated depending on how you view things. Some Theravada monastics do not accept using Mahayana Bhikkhunis to ordain Theravada Bhikkhunis. Some say it's perfectly fine. It's a hotly debated topic. This topic of Bhikkhunis is nowhere near settled in Theravada. Although there are now thousands of Bhikkhunis, so it's happening whether people like it or not, basically. But in some places, like in Thailand, they just won't recognize Bhikkhunis. Now, there are places I know Bhikkhunis who go to Thailand. So there are places where they are accepted, and there are a few Bhikkhuni monasteries in Thailand. Although it's still generally, at least from the old timers, it's not an accepted. I think over time it will become more so. But even more real scholarship has shown that actually, technically, the Buddha never rescinded just bhikkhus ordaining bhikkhunis. So, you technically don't really need there to be on both sides. Although it gets complicated because I read both, I study both the bhikkhu and the bhikkhuni rules. A, because the Buddha says that a learned bhikkhu should know both. And B, because I eventually want to be able to ordain bhikkhunis. So I should know both. And when it's in most rules, when it's described what is a bhikkhuni, the description is a female who has been ordained on both sides. So people will point to that and say, well, this says it's both sides. And then people will point to the Bhikkhuni section of the Khandika, which is a very kind of obscure section. And like, even monastics don't really know, study this even a lot. But in there, the Buddha allows for bhikkhus to ordain bhikkhunis. So there's a lot of debate back and forth and conflicts and view and different ways that people interpret things that that cause a lot of the division on this topic. So it's not a matter that anybody's saying there really weren't any bhikkhunis in the past and the Buddha never wanted to ordain bhikkhunis. That's not a matter. The matter is they died out, and 1,000 years of elders have basically just decided that there's nothing that can be done about it. So who am I to say anything about it? For better or worse, there is a strong Western influence that brought back the Bhikkhuni order. It took Buddhist practitioners from the outside to kind of push it. That's not to diminish the impact of the Sri Lankan bhikkhus and women. Not to diminish that either, because they were a strong force in this. But bhikkhunis didn't officially exist again until 1993, I think. 1993, somewhere's around there. Early 90s. All right. Are there places that ordain people with disabilities? If so, how are practices adapted to meet their needs while maintaining the integrity and spirit of the practice? The thing about ordination is that you really are meant to be a very healthy person that's not a burden on supporters. So there are a variety of health issues that essentially disqualify you from becoming a monastic. So, it depends on. There's a variety that may or may not allow you to ordain, depending on depending on the monastic lineage, depending Mahayana Theravada, depending on how well supported they are, etc. But really, the monastic life, I like to adapt. I like to adapt the quote I remember so much when I was 17, 18, 16, 17, and learning in the process of getting my driver's license, and they say driving is a privilege, not a right. And so becoming a monastic is a privilege, not a right. And I mean a privilege in every monastic should be grateful for their good karma that they were able to become a monastic in this lifetime, because there are people, and I've met them, where they would like to become a monastic, but they can't for one reason or another. And I don't think it's necessarily a good thing that we should, out of some kind of misguided compassion, just start saying, we don't need to follow these rules. We'll just, whoever, it doesn't matter. Because the monastic order is supported by lay people. In the West, even if you are healthy, there's places that will be like, we can't afford to have another monastic. We just don't have the support. So you have to find somewhere else to ordain. In Buddhist countries, probably a bit different because it's well supported, it's integrated into the culture. Might be a bit easier to do so. I'm not sure. I don't have a lot of experience of Buddhist countries in Asia. But this should be understood that not everybody can become a monastic. And some people, they try to live as much of a monastic life as they can in their lay life. And there's precedent for that in the suttas. Venerable Gatikara, right? The potter who was became a non-returner and was helping his parents as a lay person and living basically like a monk, even though he wasn't a monk. And even sometimes, you might be able to be an anagarika or a samanera. If you might not work with the rules, but maybe they can still support you anyway. It really is it's very heavily dependent on the place. Like I go and start Maggasekha, and it's me and one other monk, and somebody comes and they have all these disabilities and all these things and everything, and we barely have a small house, and we barely get make enough donations to exist. I can't take this person on, even if I really wanted to. And I think they're a good Dhamma practitioner. The monastic rules say this. The donations say that. It's not going to happen. So there's a lot of different factors, even in places that do want to be more welcoming and open to ordaining people who most places would not ordain. It's still very complicated. So I think, every day since I've become a monk, I've not had one time where I decided, there's something better in life for me to do. I'm so happy that everything worked out in this life that I was able to become a monastic. And so I try not to waste that. Right? People are generous towards me. They support me. I'm a debtor to the people who support me, to the people who ordain me. I better not waste that. I better practice well, right? And act well and develop myself well. Because if not, I'm wasting that. And that's not good. That's not good for my karma. And it's not good for anybody else. It's not good for the faith of the Dhamma and the monastic or anything like that. So there's a lot of factors that will disqualify many people from becoming monastics. All right, just going through the chats. Tokyo has an interesting question. Would you say that there are different monks for different people? Yes. Yes, I would. Yeah. There are people who, connect to me. And there are people who will never, who's like, who the heck is this Bate J? God, he looks stupid. He says stupid things. I can't do anything with this guy. I'm not going to follow this guy. Right? And some people, just like my preceptor who ordained me, Bhante Gunaratana, Bhante G, who's one of the most famous Theravada monks in the world. What I saw is people will come and they'll be like, oh, Bhante G, I love Bhante G. And they'll be around him for a couple of years, but then they'll fade away. Even somebody like Bhante G. And there are some people I met who were friends and followed Bhante G for 40 years. Same thing will be for me. There will be people who, throughout my monastic career, who will see no value in listening to me whatsoever. And there are people who will be with me for 40 years. That's just how it goes. There are plenty of very famous, very well respected monastics that I have zero interest in listening to. Zero. Now, I tried to listen to them when I was in my early days, but they just weren't for me. I'll give you an example. This is going to be blasphemy to a lot of people, but Luangpur Sumedho, Ajahn Sumedho, there's really not any word that he's ever said, anything that I've read of him that is connected with me in any way. But many people love Ajahn Sumedho. Luangpur now, because he's an elderly grandpa. And that doesn't say anything bad about Luangpur Sumedho or me. It's just there's just no karmic connection. There's just his teachings do not resonate with me, and that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. His teachings resonate with a lot of people. So, if you have monastics that resonate with you, that's good. They might not forever. Even in the Maggasekha, the online community that we have, there were people who were moderators, who were part of the community for 3 or 4 years. They liked being with me and stuff like that, but eventually they faded away. They moved on. Maybe they were with me for what they needed to get from me, and then they moved on. That's how it's been with me. I've never had one teacher. I've never had one teacher. Neither did Bhante Gunaratana, who ordained me. But I've never had one person who's like, this is my guru, this is my teacher. I listen to everything they say, and I'll be like everything they say. No, I've never had that. What I've had is akin to when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. What I've had is a series of monastics who have been very important to me on my path at different times. Some of them I've met, some of them are dead, so I'll never meet them. And an example of this is Ajahn Brahm. I listened to Ajahn Brahm, talks religiously for 7 years. I loved Ajahn Brahm. But there was a time where, it was time for me to move on from Ajahn Brahm. I've gotten to meet him. I've stayed at his monastery as a monk and all these things. And I like him, but him as a teacher is not for me right now. But I wouldn't be where I am right now if it wasn't for him. He was who I needed at that time. And so there already have been. I've been a monk. I've been in robes 7 years. I've been a monk 7 years. In robes almost 8. Counting a year as a Samanera. And I've already had dozens of people come through my life. They come and they enjoy my teachings. And then after 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, they go away. And then maybe I see them again a year or two down the road. Maybe I never see them again. That's okay. For whatever reason, I was an influence on their path for as long as they needed me. And then they moved on. No problem. Even one of the people who I owe a debt of gratitude to is this. Those of you who are on the Maggasekha Discord, Reed. Reed was a moderator and basically the one who helped run the community, the Maggasekha community on Discord for 4 years. One day he was like, Bante's, I'm getting more into this type of Buddhism and I'm going to retire as a mod. And I said, thank you for all you've done, man. Much appreciated. You're always welcome. And, good good practice wherever you go. This is somebody who I've met. Went on long walks with and who, I spoke to daily for years. But it was his time to go. So he went. This is the nature of how these things work. So no problem. Yes, there are different monks for different people. Tokyo. I know that monks practice the same thing, but are still their own person, so they still have their own beliefs relating to society. Does that complicate things with those who want to practice? If the monastics make that really a part of their, shtick, if that's what they're talking about half the time, then it will complicate things because there will be people who it will, you know, there will be people who, oh, this person not only is teaches Dhamma, but they also view this world the same way I do, and this is my person. And then other people are kind of like, I just wanted to hear about the suttas, and this person's like talking about this and this and this and this, and I may agree with them, I may not agree with them, but I just want to hear about the suttas, So, um, and I don't put my views about how a monk should be on other monks. Some monks want to be that way. I don't think it's the right way, so I don't do it. I'll never talk about my personal views. Like sometimes I've talked about my political days and stuff like that, and because I was even a party boss, I was a political part. I mean, yeah. So I've for a good number of my years, I've been involved in politics, and if I started talking about politics, some people will be like, "Yeah, Bante J's right," and some people are like, "I can't believe Bante J thinks that." Oh my god, I followed this idiot for all these years, right? It doesn't really help. What does it do? It pushes away some people and reinforces views in others. I'm trying to let go of my own views. I don't need to be reinforcing it in other people. So at Bhavana Society, in the retreats, when there's a Q&A, Bhante G always had the same policy. We don't answer questions about politics, about social issues, about the environment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I follow that same policy. I don't start yapping on about politics and this president that and this politician this or the environment this. I don't do that. There's a million other places for people to do that. How many people over the years have said, Bante, it's so nice, especially like 4 or 5 years ago when things were really starting to kick off. And there were people who were very political people. And they would tell me, Bante, it's so nice to have one place where I can go to this community and all there is Dhamma and positivity. Oh, yeah. Well, good. Good. That's what I want to foster. If you want to talk about this or that or whatever, go to some other place. Here, it's about Dhamma. So that's how I want to be, and regarding that. Now, you still have to be able to, how shall I say, address people's concerns that arise due to things in society in ways that are focused on Dhamma. And that's a complicated tightrope. It's not easy, but it is something that I've been practicing now for a good 7-8 years. So I'm gonna say I'm decently good at it. Because really, if you want to say this politician, this or that, the issue is really not that politician. What's the issue before that? Like when Gregory asked about the monk. What's the real issue? Views. Buddha has a lot to say about views. Right? What's more valuable? Me helping to cut to the the origin, the underlying thing, or me playing around on the surface? To me, cutting to the underlying issue is the more important thing than getting involved in the surface. Too many people are involved in the surface. They don't really have the time or the inclination or the desire or the wisdom to go deeper than that. I pride myself in knowing that there are people in my community with a variety of different political views, social views, etc. Whatever political and social view you have, if you're a Dhamma practitioner, what is best for myself and others? We have different understandings of this. But if you keep mindfulness at the fore, reflecting what's best for myself and others at the fore, then you're going to move towards the skillful. That's how I view things. All right. All right. Gregory has a question. The Vinaya has complex legal processes for adjudicating disputes. You got that right. And holding monastics to account. Are these procedures still followed in Western monasteries, or are issues addressed more informally? Not even Western and Eastern monasteries. In general, most monasteries are way more informal about the Vinaya than they probably should be. There's a pretty good chance that most monks in the world are not following most of the monastic rules. Even in Buddhist countries, it's very common for monks to have money and things like this. So Western or Eastern, it's not so much a distinction in that regard. It's more about the lineage and how strictly they want to hold to the Vinaya. But even like Thai Forest, which is fairly universally known for strict Vinaya, some of the ways they perceive Vinaya is kind of wacky. It's kind of off, even by the standards of some people in the Thai Forest who will say this. Um, but it is, like you say, it's a complex legal process, etc. It's also viewed very differently depending on place and time. How different, even between monastery and monastery, how different rules are held and how procedures are done. A huge variety in these things. I've only, I mean, how many monasteries and temples have I visited? In total, maybe 20. And I've seen a huge variety in how I've done Patimokkha, reciting the monastic rules with the Thai Forest, Dhamma and Mahanakai. I've done it with the Sri Lankans. I haven't done it with the Burmese. But I've done even the monastic rule, the reciting of the rules with multiple different traditions. And they do it differently. And they hold things differently and view things differently. So it's a real huge diversity. of how things are viewed. People talking about Gatikar the Potter, one of the coolest dudes. I really like Gatikar the Potter. Gatikar the Potter, if you are a Buddhist today, you have Gatikar the Potter to thank for it. Because it was Gatikar the Potter that forced Buddha Gautama, when he was just a layperson stuck in samsara, to visit Buddha. Was it Buddha Siki? One of the previous Buddhas. And from that meeting, Gautama, who would later become Buddha Gautama, decided to become a Buddha. So you have, if you are grateful for Buddhism, you have Gatikara the Potter from who knows how many ungodly millions of years ago to thank. Yeah. Although I think he's technically, I think he's in the divine abodes. I think he's a non-returner. So thank you, Gatikara, up there in the divine abodes. See, this is interesting. Jay says, this is a very common misconception. I was thinking if someone becomes an arhat, they need to ordain in 7 days or they die. But what if that happens and they're too disabled to be ordained? This is not true. The ordain in 7 days or else they'll die. This is not the case. There's no documentation in the suttas that says this. The few examples of lay people becoming awakened in the suttas in the monastic Vinaya, and there's few. There's 2, maybe 3. Within a short amount of time, they became monastics. And it's not because they had to or else they would die. They're awakened. They don't care. I mean, unless they want to, they're not Buddhas. They're awakened. They don't need to stick around. There's no, it's not like, oh, I need to stick around. You're like that. They're not like, they don't really care in that regard. I mean, maybe they have compassion to share Dhamma, but other than that, there's no need for them to stick around. Their job is done. So there's no worry about they're going to die in 7 days. What the issue is, and one of the suttas that's talking about this is there is nothing left for me. There's no point. There's no point in living the lay life. There's nothing good in me as an awakened being living the lay life. Why would I bother? I'll just abide the rest of my time out in the monastic sangha. And so they become monastics. And that makes perfect sense. I'm very highly suspicious of lay people being arahants. Extremely suspicious. You can't deny that in very, very rare situations, a layperson can become an arahant. But I'd be highly suspicious if they stayed lay people. Extremely highly suspicious. I don't think that, I mean, this is something that is more common in Mahayana, obviously. And you do have examples. Some people think that Deepa Ma was awakened. I can't know one way or the other, but I doubt it. Maybe she was a non-returner. Maybe she was highly advanced, but awakened? Probably not. Could be wrong, but I don't think so. And as a layperson to have become awakened, they basically were living like a monastic anyway. You can't live a full-on regular layperson's life and become awakened. That's not how it works. You can become a stream enter. You can become a once returner. You can become a non-returner. Although even non-returner, you're inclined towards a more monastic style of life as a layperson. But as an arahant who stays a layperson, I doubt. All right. Hey, Christine. Kristen, good to see you. Bante J is the indie band of monastics, and we are hipsters. Oh boy. Jeez Louise. Yes, this is very important. Yeah. I think that's what I'm trying to learn the most. Just because someone doesn't resonate with you doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. Agreed. Yeah. Louisa, hello, Louisa says, I love Ajahn Brahmali. I do too. Ajahn Brahmali and Bhante Sujato are two of my go-tos in terms of the suttas. And Ajahn Brahmali with the Vinaya. Ajahn Brahmali has done a great service to English-speaking monastics in translating the Vinaya into English, because it's the full totality of it really hasn't. I mean, it kind of has been done, but not in a way that was easy for the average person to be able to do it. Um, I don't even know if it was actually fully translated into English, because technically the book of the discipline is PTS. So I don't think it actually was fully translated. Um, Bhante Siddhaso did a translation of it. That's how I read parts of the Vinaya that I couldn't read before because it wasn't translated. Um, but yeah, Ajahn Brahmali is an awesome. I've been able to spend time with him. When I spent a week at Bodhinyana, we did multiple work periods together, and we had multiple tea periods where I got to speak with him, and I quite like Ajahn Brahmali and Bhante Sujato too. I got to spend some time, one day and night with Ajahn with Bhante Sujato, and a couple hours total, and two separate times while I was in Australia, and I enjoy him too. Bhante Sujato is Ajahn Brahmali is much more traditional in many ways. Bhante Sujato is an interesting character. I like him, but he's an interesting character that's not for everybody. That's for sure. All right. Rick is the modern day Gatikara the Potter, apparently. Right? He's living the lay life almost like monastic. He does pottery and sculpture. There you go. He could be a good role model for you, Rick. I always encourage people to look at the Buddhist disciples and find one that kind of resonates with you as a role model. Um, Gatikara the Potter could be a good role model for you. A good ideal to strive towards. Quick question. Since Dhamma is likable and enjoyable by hearing and sight, reading, then why does the Buddha have us take refuge in the Dhamma? Isn't that giving into sensual pleasures? Taking refuge in the Dhamma is taking the Dhamma as your guide in life. The Dhamma as the nature of reality, like living in line with that nature. The Dhamma as the teachings of the Buddha. keeping them. I'm actually writing the third of the four Buddha's attitudes, which is raise high the banner of seers. And part of that is keeping the Dhamma high in your life, in front of you, right? Always with you. That's what when you go for refuge to the Dhamma, it's about this nature of reality, this teaching, using it as your guide, even as your comfort. It doesn't give comfort the same as like, you know, um, uh, I lost my child and my spouse, and I'm, Christ says I'm going to be able to see them in heaven. It doesn't give that kind of comfort. Buddhism is much more brutal in that regard. Um, Actually, in Buddhism, it would be like the opposite. You may not see, your loved one in a future life, and you'll be totally different beings, and there won't, it won't be like what you wish it to be, um, which can be brutal for people. But you go for refuge to the Dhamma as a guide, as a way of living life that leads to your benefit and the benefit of others. Karuna, you're killing me. I'm glad I don't have to repeat it because it was about 20 minutes long. Maybe not 20 minutes, but it was. I talked on Bhikkunis probably at least for a good 6 or 7 minutes. So yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, I mean, you could say part of it is misogyny, but one of the things that I talked about was the Eastern and the Asian perspective of respect for the elders and not going against what elders in the past have set down. And so I think that Westerners really either don't understand that perspective to include it into why things happen or minimize it greatly. I think that's something important to understand as to why traditional Buddhist countries view things as they do. Not the totality of why they do it, but it's definitely a part. Who says this? That sounds like some Mahayanist. I'm being facetiously jerky. People will say stuff. Oh, you don't need to be ordained to be awakened, and I'll say you never say that to a dude. I would, but yeah, I understand what you're saying there. Yeah, like the Tibetan perspective, some of the Mahayana um, perspective of you know practice lots of merit so you can be born as a man to become awakened. These kind of things. Yeah, I've not come across that in Theravada. Um, I'm sure it probably does exist somewhere, but I am the last person to really say that they have a lot of experience with traditional Buddhist peoples. I don't. I really don't. People think that because I was ordained at Bhavana and I'm around Bhante G, who's a Sri Lankan monastic. He's 95 years old and he spent the majority of those years in America. He's tried to do a variety of things to update Buddhism for America, including being basically the first Theravada monastic in the country to ordain women. So he's not exactly the pillar of traditional Buddhism, and also not really into rites and rituals and parita chanting and blessings and house blood. I never did any of that traditional stuff with Bhante. So I really don't know as much about traditional Buddhist country Buddhism as you might think, which is why I try not to speak too much for them, right, or negatively about them. Uh-oh, some lay dude at Katina. Oh boy. Well, you just have to sick Ayasoma on him. I guess was Ayasoma there? That would be quite funny. Like sending a pit bull after a poodle. Ugh. And well, the other thing, I guess the other part of this is remember that Ananda is asked, is there such a thing as good desire? And Ananda says, yes, the desire that leads to the ending of all desire. So if you are desiring to listen to Dhamma talks and practice the Dhamma and go to retreats and things like that, it's still desire. Still have to let go of that eventually. But it's the desire that's leading to the ending of desire. So at least in that specific aspect, it's good desire. Gregory brings up an interesting thing. Gregory, in this quote, in this sutta, I'd like to point you towards what is the Buddha not saying? If husband and wife wish to see each other in future lives, they should have the same faith, virtuous behavior, generosity, and wisdom. What is the Buddha not saying there? Anybody? Anybody care to take a guess? Oh, Douse already got it. Douse knows because he's heard me talk about this before. Yeah, yeah. Douse knows. In the next life, husband and wife might meet each other as a human and a dog. It is it is said it doesn't work how we might want. Exactly. You might know each other. Doesn't mean you're going to be husband and wife again. You know, doesn't one might be the mother and the other might be the child. The husband might be the mother and the daughter and the wife might be the son. You know, you'll have connection. That doesn't mean that you'll be like this romantic thing like we will meet each other throughout the ages. Now, of course, this is not in the suttas, but you do have the later work of talking about how, say, for example, my man, the Buddhist disciple who I connect the most with, the grumpy old man of the Sangha, Maggasekha, who spent many, many lifetimes being with Bada Kapalani. Sometimes they were married. Sometimes they were just religious practitioners, right? It was different each time. They weren't always together married. And then in the last life, they were both like, okay, we're going to become awakened under the Buddha. And they, became bhikkhu and bhikkhuni. Right. And again, this is not in the suttas. This is something that is later. But even in that, there's they weren't like humans married to each other every life. That's just not how it goes. But you have this romantic thing. My dear, no matter how many lifetimes and how across the cosmos and the millennia, I will always seek to be with you again in the future, in future lives. It's very romantic, right? They should. I'm sure that somebody's, maybe they've not made a movie about it, but I'm sure somebody's made a book like that, right? We will see each other throughout the many lifetimes in the future. Very like, romantic, and so I'm sure it would be like a Lifetime movie or something like that. But it's not necessarily reality. Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. I know we're close in age, Karuna, but I don't know your history in terms of your experience with diaspora communities. Um, so it's not as surprising to me as one might think. But yeah, the West has done something very rare in the world, and I see that being eroded away. So yeah, it's quite interesting how things are going. But yeah, this is a place like America, at least for the time being, there can be more, you know, equal views and things like that. We'll see what the future holds. All societies and all things fade. Oh, were you not at Empty Cloud? I need to practice restraint because we were in front of the abbot. I was just gonna say you should get the abbot involved. That would be fun. Okay. There's no May. There's no May here. We may have been. No, we were. The My understanding and my inclination is that about 99% of who you think you are doesn't survive into the next life. It just doesn't. There might be some karmic inclinations, but I wouldn't get attached to whoever you are in this life because it's pretty much going to be gone by the next. This is why, what do I always make the joke. If I don't become awakened, or at least become a stream mentor, in this life I'm a human male. Next life I could be a female kangaroo. Who knows? If I'm really screwed enough that I become a female kangaroo, at least I hope it's at one of the monasteries. There's lots of kangaroos in the monasteries in Australia. At least I'll be close to the Dhamma then. All right. Hello, Julie. See the movie The Fountain? Yes, I know. Fountain's a great movie, and that came out right around the time, towards the end of my wife's life. That's one of those movies that was part of my, how shall I say, contemplation of existence. Good movie, right? And I mean, obviously, like cancer, wife. That there's lots of reasons why I had a connection to that movie. Yeah, good movie. I'm more attracted to monasteries with male and female monks. Should I get to ordain in the future? Is there a special reason for Theravada monasteries to be solely female monks? Well, talk to the Bhikkunis. I have. Most of the Bhikkunis don't want to be in monasteries with monks for a variety of different reasons. Even Bhante Ji, who was literally pretty much the first in Theravada in the West to have a place where both bhikkhus and bhikkhunis live together. He views his attempt of, I don't know, 15, 16 years of doing it. He views that as a mistake. He says, even in the Buddha's day, they did not do this. It's not a good thing. So, in all honesty, I don't necessarily think it's a good thing. I was more inclined towards doing something, in like having Maggasekha be much more like how Empty Cloud is now, but I'm not inclined to doing that anymore. And this is after speaking to dozens of bhikkhunis, right? Because it's like, okay, if I'm going to have a place, well, I should know what women want, or what their view of this is. And the overwhelming majority are much more comfortable for a variety of reasons in bhikkhuni monasteries. So, when I think of having my own monastery, the best thing to do is probably, and I've also been to Australia. I've been to, the Bhikkunis are like an hour away from the bhikkhus in Australia. And guess what? They like it that way. Because they're their own thing. There's no Ajahn Brahmins doesn't hoard over them or anything. They're their own thing. They do, they have their own thing going there and they like it that way. So, in the future, if Maggasekha gets to the point where, I actually have crazy people, men and women who want to ordain under me, then what I would like to see is, if it's on the same property, then to have maybe, many, many, many acres over here are the bhikkhunis, many, many, many acres over here are the bhikkhus. They have their own facilities, their own places, and then they come down to the sala, to the middle, where, to eat or to be with lay people or give teachings, etc., etc., etc. That, if it's the same property, would be the most ideal. But even that, not all bhikkhunis are even inclined to, because I've spoken to like Ayatatolog, I've spoken to very senior bhikkhunis about these things. And even that is not necessarily seen as what the majority of bhikkhunis would want. It would have to be done in very skillful, special ways. So, I would not expect there to be dozens of Empty Cloud style places in the country. That's Empty Cloud is a very, very unique place, because the relationship that Bhante and Aya have is extremely rare and unique. There's definitely some karmic affinity there. There's something there that these two people would randomly kind of find each other and create this place and do this thing in a certain way. And there's very specific karmic conditions that have created Buddhist insights in Empty Cloud. And that's never going to be the norm. It's more normal or at least it seems to be more normal in Mahayana. But even Aya Soma has told me about her visits with like Thich Nhat Hanh places where there's bhikkhus and bhikkhunis in the same place, and there's issues, and even still, the Bhikkunis are kind of seen as lesser, and it's not all rosy in that perspective either. So, you know, I wouldn't. It's much more complicated than the Bhikkhus just don't want any Bhikkhunis to be around. It is much more when you really take the time to listen to the perspectives of the bhikkhus and the bhikkhunis, the men and the women, and not make any assumptions, then you can understand a little bit more, you know, what's probably the best thing to do. And from what I've known of what happened to Bhavana over the years, there's always a lot of strife between the bhikkhus and the bhikkhunis, all kinds of issues. A lot of that had to do with because there was never really strong leadership. There was never really strong abbotship at Bhavana. There never has been. It's not really Bhante G's strong suit. And you would need some strong leadership to keep people from throwing verbal daggers at each other. But I think that's more the rare exception. Empty cloud is more the rare exception than the rule. Karuna, there are no two sanghas that lived side by side in Amaravati. There's the bhikkhus, and then there's the what do they call them, Siladharas. There's no this is not an equal relationship. There's no conflict that there would be between like a bhikkhu and a bhikkhuni, issues like that. So it's a very different thing there. I'm sure, which you might learn from maybe during the Vata, you got to spend time with one of my favorite bhikkhunis in existence, Aya Brahmavara, who is a brand new bhikkhuni. I was at her ordination a couple years ago, but who has been a Siladhara in monastic life for like 30 years. She's such a wonderful person. She's one of my favorite people in the monastic life. She can tell you all about Amaravati. So can Aya Santusika, who's a Karuna Buddhist Vihara. She was also, before she became a bhikkhuni, for like 15 years, part of that system, Amaravati system. I love Aya Brahmavara. Yes, so do I. She's like my Dhamma sister in boisterousness. I had a lot of good experiences with her when I spent those 3 months in the tent at Dhamma, going down and going down to the bhikkhuni area once a day, well, twice, because it went for my food, and then in the evening get to talk to her and a couple of the bhikkhunis and seminaries and things like that. It was not an easy 3 months, but it was a really good 3 months. All right. Where do you think you will have your monastery, Bhante? Well, the hope is that it will be in Colorado. That's what I'm working towards. That's why I'm building connections. I'm going to be doing some teachings there. I've already done online teachings there. I'm going to start, I'm starting to spend more time there, spending a couple weeks on the first I'm leaving, building connections, finding people who support my vision, all of these kind of things. So Colorado is what I'm aiming for. Will it be Colorado? I don't know. Will I even have a monastery? I don't know. I could be done by then. I could just not have enough support to get to that point. I could have nobody who wants to ordain under me. There's a huge variety of factors that are up in the air at this point. So we'll have to see where it goes. But right now, the focus is developing Colorado. Hey, everybody loves Aya Brahmavara. Very good. Me too. I was so honored to be at her ordination. It was a 4 Bhikkhuni ordination and 1 Samaneri. One of my other favorite Dhamma sisters in this world, Samaneri Tavira. I watched her become a Samaneri. So I'm hoping I maybe will be able to go to her Bhikkhuni ordination. We'll see. But I was at Ayasoma's ordination too. I got to be a part of that. Ayasoma is like my monastic sister from another Italian mother. Oh. All right. Yeah, well, there's also the possibility of another certain Bhikkhuni, very senior Bhikkhuni, staying at Empty Cloud next year. It's not set, it's not 100%, but it might be me covering her place while she goes to Empty Cloud for 3 months and me staying there by myself for 3 months. We'll see. But yeah. Oh boy. I lost track of the time. We don't have even time to do meditation. That's very, very rare that there's a Dhammapalooza with no meditation. I think it's only happened maybe 2 or 3 other times. But every once in a while it does happen. All right. So I think we're good. Why don't we? It's also very, very rare that there's this many people this late because people tend to drop off once the meditation starts. Okay. Let's do business. No, that and that. There we go. All right, friends. So if you are with us for the first time live or joining, watching this later, um, then if you're interested in finding out more about me and my organization, or when there will be, more streams and things like that, you can go to the website scrolling on the bottom of the screen, Maggasekha.org, Maggasekha.org. On that website, that's my headquarters. That's where every time I write a new article just came out this Friday. Hopefully I'll get the next one done for next Friday. A new article, a new retreat that I do Zoom retreats, a new a new event, my travels, all kinds of things, to keep up to date and to keep informed about these things. You can go to that website. On the top right of that website, you can also put your email in, and you will get an email every time I post something new. So that's how the best way to keep informed. We also have the Maggasekha community on the program called Discord. This is a community that has a focus on the early Buddhist texts, the suttas, both in study and in practice. We've been reading through the suttas, meditating together, supporting each other for many years. As I said in the beginning, many people have come and gone. Few people are here for a long period of time. Douse is one of those. Douse has been around for a long, long time. And even he comes and goes. But so if this sounds interesting to you, you can send an email to the email listed on the screen, Maggasekha@gmail.com, and ask for an invite, and we can send you an invite. So, in terms of the regularly scheduled activities, all of my activities are dependent on the place I'm staying, whether they have internet, whether my events conflict with their events, etc. But when I'm in the normal schedule, when I'm able to do it, is Monday nights here, 7 p.m. Eastern, GMT -5. We have our Dhammapalooza. Then, um, if I have an article coming out, the article usually comes out on Fridays. If I do a video like an Ask Abante, which I've been bad at, I should. Once I got out of the habit, it's hard to get back into it. That usually will come out on Wednesdays. Saturdays, if you're on Insight Timer, I'm a teacher on Insight Timer. So I do an hour and a half session on Insight Timer every Saturday, 3 p.m. New York time. That's a session that includes meditation, Dhamma talk, Q&A. Sunday nights, a tradition that has been going on for almost as long as the Maggasekha Discord has existed. Sunday night, 7 p.m., we as a community come together and we read suttas together. That means it's just not me or Aya Sudama who reads suttas. Everybody gets a chance to read the suttas. They volunteer to read. So we read it all together. So that's another great weekly event, in addition to all the other things that are happening on the Maggasekha Discord. And also, I almost forgot, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. New York time, I do a live stream on this channel. So in about 11 hours, I'll be live again on this channel tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. New York time. And we do what's called Morning Monastery Experience. And this is a half hour of stream that is essentially an emulation of what you would experience if you stayed at a monastery. The morning puja chanting session. So we do some precepts, we do some chanting, I give a little Dhamma talk and do a little Dhamma teaching, small amount. And this is a very good, we have every day between 7 and 10 people who come, sometimes even more, but average is about 7 to 10 regulars, community members who come and start their day. We all start our day together saying good morning to each other, although some people are in Europe, so it's afternoon. But and we do this session, and for those of you who it's morning, it's a good way to start your day out with Dhamma. So you're welcome to join us on the channel, 8 a.m. Monday through Friday. So speaking of also on the channel, you can click to subscribe and click the bell, and every time I go live, every time a new video comes out, you'll get a notification as well. All right, friends, let's do our sharing of merits and then call it a night. Where are we? Oh, that's right. Okay. Dukkha patta chane dukkha, bhaya patta chane bhaya, soka patta chane soka, hontu sabbe pipaniyo, etavata cha mehi sampatang punya sampatang, sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya, akasatta chabumata deva naga mahedika, punyang tang anumoditva charang rakantu sasanang. May the suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we've thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas, nagas, and yakas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddhist dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right, friends, Sukhi Hotu, may you be well and at ease. Practice well and be well. May you have a spiritually successful and peaceful practice until we meet again, which, if I'm alive, could be tomorrow morning for a morning monastery experience, or could be next Saturday for Insight Timer, Sunday for Suttas Monday, or next Monday for another Dhammapalooza. Have a good week.